In 1991, Pearl Jam released one of the best debut albums of the grunge years, which was 10. This was, and still is, an incredible album. And then 2 years later, they released Versus, which some may say is maybe even better than 10. So now you have two great albums under their belt. Now it's time to see if they can release a third great album and bowl a turkey. Or for those of you who are in Canada, let's see if they can pull a hat trick. So then, in late 1994, they released Vitalogy, and they kind of messed it up. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Vitalogy is the third studio album by Seattle grunge icons Pearl Jam, with an early vinyl release on November 22nd, 1994, and full release on December 6th. Through Epic Records and is celebrating 30 years, Pearl Jam wrote and recorded Vitalogy while touring for Versus. They decided to take a few chances as the album's sound is more diverse than previous releases and consists of aggressive rock songs, ballads, and other styles, making it Pearl Jam's most experimental album thus far. The album was considered a departure from the grunge sounds of the band's first two albums, with a focus on punk rock and hardcore styles in its production. Now, that sounds all good, but they also decided to add some tracks that make you wonder, what were they thinking? First, let's talk about the making of Pearl Jam's Vitalogy, and that will help us understand why they made the decisions that they did. Pearl Jam began writing Vitalogy during sound checks on that tour for their previous album, Versus. They recorded most of the tracks during tour breaks, starting in late 1993 in New Orleans. However, the recording process was strained due to rising tensions within the band. Communication had broken down, and there were disagreements about the album's direction. Drummer Dave Abruzzi felt that the communication problem started when guitarist Stone Gossard stepped back from his role as mediator. Gossard, in turn, felt that Eddie Vedder was making most of the final decisions for the album. The band struggled to collaborate, leading to a process where most songs were developed from jam sessions and recorded quickly. Adding to the tension, drummer Dave Abruzzi was fired in August 19, making the difficult decision to let Abruzzi go. Abruzzi was initially replaced by session drummers and his drum tech, Jimmy Shoaff, who I can't find a picture of, but he played on Satan's Bed. And Jack Irons, the former drummer of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, joined the band near the end of the recording process and played on Hey Foxy Fandle Mama, That's Me, or Stupid Mop. That's the other name for it. Vitalogy marked a significant shift in Pearl Jam's sound. While their previous albums were rooted in grunge, Vitalogy leaned more towards punk rock and hardcore. Eddie Vedder's increased involvement as a guitarist and songwriter contributed to this change. The album also featured fewer guitar solos and more rhythmic elements than their earlier work. Some critics and publications have identified the album as punk rock, while others have labeled it as grunge. Lyrically, Vitalogy explores themes of fame, privacy, and the personal struggles of the band members. Songs like Not For You, Pride 2, and Corduroy address the pressures and frustrations of their newfound fame. But here was the problem. The album features experimental tracks like Bugs with Eddie Vedder playing an accordion and Hey Foxy Fandle Mama, That's Me, which incorporates looped recordings from a psychiatric hospital. So I think it was songs like that that ruined the album and kept it from being great, because the album had potential to be one of their best. For example, let's look at the packaging. The album package was inspired by a medical book. The album's title, Vitalogy, was taken from an early 20th century medical book Vedder found at a garage sale. The book also inspired the album's unique packaging and liner notes. The book features excerpts from the medical book, along with personal reflections, poems, and even an x-ray of Eddie Vedder's teeth. Vitalogy was first released on vinyl on November 22nd, 1994, selling 34,000 copies in its first week and setting a record for vinyl sales at that time. It was the first album to chart on the Billboard 200 based solely on vinyl sales since CDs became the dominant format. The CD and cassette release followed 2 weeks later on December 6, 1994, and Vitalogy debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200. It sold 877,000 copies in its first week, making it the second fastest-selling album in history at that time. Vitalogy received critical acclaim upon its release, with reviewers praising its raw energy, musical diversity, and introspective lyrics. It has been certified 5 times platinum. The album was included on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time in 2003. It wasn't really that high. I think it's like 485, whatever it is on the image I'm showing right now. And then it was on again on 2012, but they dropped it for the 2020 edition. But Vitalogy is considered a pivotal album in their discography, making their transition to a more experimental and punk-influenced sound. I think the album has some of their best songs out of the entire discography, in my personal opinion. So, for example, Better Man was written by Eddie Vedder. It's about an abusive relationship. Producer Brendan O'Brien considered it a blatantly great pop song, but Pearl Jam was initially reluctant to record it because they felt it was too accessible, but they were glad they did to include it because Better Man was the most successful song from Vitalogy on the rock charts. It spent 8 weeks at #1 on the mainstream rock chart and reached #2 on the modern rock tracks. Then there's one of their heaviest songs called Spin the Black Circle. This was the lead single from the album. It was the band's first single to reach Billboard Hot 100 chart, peaking at #18. It was also the band's first Grammy Award winner. It won Best Hard Rock Performance in 1996. Then there was Corduroy. According to Eddie Vedder, Corduroy is about one person's relationship with a million people. What's interesting is that this song does not have printed lyrics in the Vitalogy album booklet. The aforementioned X-ray of Eddie Vedder's teeth is displayed on the page for Corduroy as opposed or instead of the lyrics. But here's a problem. The album has lots of filler tracks, and that's what ruins the album. First one is Bugs. This features Eddie Vedder on accordion, which he found at a thrift shop. One critic considered the song Tom Waits like Weird Attack, but for me, it's annoying and unlistenable, so whenever I listen to this album, I just skip it. Then there's a closing track called Hey Foxy Fandom Mama, That's Me, or sometimes it's referred to as Stupid Mop. It's a sonic collage created looped recordings of actual patients from a psychiatric hospital. And that sounds artistic and all, but no one wants to listen to that, especially when listening to a Pearl Jam album. I usually turn the album off once it gets to that song because there's really no point to listen to it after that. So anyway, then there's the track Pride 2, which is a minute of Eddie Vedder mumbling, and there's also Satan's Bed, which sounds like a garage rock song, which is not terrible, but not the same caliber as the songs from the first two albums. So to sum it up, this album is 80% awesome and 20% crap. So for example, it has some of the best Pearl Jam songs that they ever recorded, which would be Last Exit, Spin the Black Circle, Not For You, Nothing Man, Corduroy, and Better Man. And then there are a few songs which are not horrible, but not great. Whipping, Aida Vanita, and Immortality. Then everything else on this album I mentioned before is just horrible. So for that reason, it's one of those albums that could have been one of their greatest albums, but it had the potential, but I think they messed it up by putting too much filler on it. So those are my thoughts on Vitalogy. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. In the meantime, check out my Pearl Jam tier list. I'll put that right here. You can see where I rank all the albums, including the new one from this year. And in the meantime, thanks for watching. Give the video a like. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you have not already. I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. I will see you in the next one.